Hey ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. So in here we want to fix the categories part here. So what we need to do is to be able to save categories. Okay, so if I click on edit so that we can use the same thing here, a record that already exists, let me click edit, and we have a list of categories here. So if I tick here, it should remember which ones I ticked. Now, this is a one-to-many relationship. What this means is that one post can have multiple categories, right? There's one-to-one relationship, like for example, one post can only have one title. So that's a one-to-one relationship. And in this case, we can just save it in the same table as the posts table because that's a one-to-one relationship. Now, in a situation where we have multiple categories that can fit on one post, that becomes difficult because if we have one column for one category, then what if the user selects 20 categories, right? Then we'll have a problem because we can't create, it's never a good thing to start creating multiple columns per category to add, because if you expect people to select maybe 20 categories, right? So you put 20 columns and then people are only selecting one or two, then you would have wasted so many columns. So instead what we do is we create a whole new table to represent a one-to-many relationship. All right, so the details we need here are, we need to know what the post name is, or the post ID, that's one thing. And then we also need to know the category ID that is saved under that post. Now, since rows are many, we can just keep saving to match as many categories as were selected for that single post. So in short, what I'm saying is these are the category, the columns we need. So let me close all these files just so we start from somewhere familiar. So I'm closing these plugins that we're not using or not dealing with right now. Okay, so we have the basic posts plugin. Now what I need is another migration file. Now please keep in mind that with one migration file, you can actually put multiple tables in here, though that is discouraged because then it's not easy to, it doesn't make them portable. You can't move. Let's say I just wanted the post state table, to move it to another project. I could just copy this migration file and move it to another project, maybe rename it or something. But if I put multiple tables in here, then I would need to go in and delete the things I don't want from there, which makes it less portable. You just need to be able to just carry. So it's better to use one migration file per table. So I just want to put another migration file for a new table, which is the mapping for, we're just going to call it posts, what do we call it? Posts category mapping or something like that, because it maps the posts and the categories together. Now, of course, you can name these things whatever it is you want. These names are not set in stone. So let me open this folder. And I'm going to open my command line by typing cmd here. And what I'll do is say PHP, because we want to run a PHP file. The file is called Thunder. And we want to make something. So we're going to say make full colon. What are we making? We're making a model. We're making a migration file. So make migration. What's the folder? Basic posts. All right, and what are we calling the migration file? We are calling this one post. I don't know which one to start with. Posts categories map. Something like that. Alrighty then, so that should have created a file. And there it is, very long name. So there it is, post categories map. Okay, a bit of a mouthful. So you can abbreviate this, right? Maybe it can be PC map or something. As long as you remember what this is, you put comments in here for the future, but we'll leave it at this. Now, if you edit this, you have to edit the file name as well, because it gets the class name from the file name. So you have to make sure you edit that. So I'm going to remove all of this stuff I don't need, and this stuff I don't need. All right, so what we do is here we have an int category, int column. That's fine, but I think they're all just going to be ints in here. So I'm going to do this, duplicate that. So what we want is to map a post. So we'll need a post ID. Great. Now it's an int here, but it's unsigned. That's true, but we can't make it auto increment. So I'm just going to say default 0, just to give it a default value. We're not going to have any varchar or text columns, so I'm going to delete these. Now, deleted could be changed to disabled, because deleted sounds so final. We just want to know if it's disabled or not. So disabled 0 means no, 1 means yes. We don't need to know when these associations were created, or yeah, we don't need to know any of that. So let's remove these. So all we're left with is this. Let's duplicate, because we need to know what categories are mapped to this particular post. So category ID as well, like that. And disabled means we can disable and enable without having to entirely delete these things. Because if a user edits something, and maybe they save a post and connect it to some categories, and then they decide, oh, these are the wrong categories, let me change. We don't need to go in and delete the actual record. We can just mark it as disabled or enabled as we need. All right, so this should work actually. Now what we need to do is run this migration file so that we can have this post category map actually active. So back here, I can copy this file name here because I want to just run one migration file. So I'm going to say PHP thunder and say migrate. What folder am I migrating? That's basic posts. Is there a file name? Let me do that and enter. So that table has been created. So if we go to our database now, we'll see that there's posts categories map, and there it is. So post ID category. Oh, wait. I didn't put the keys here, so I should have. Yeah, disabled has a key, but the others also need a key. So let's do post ID and category ID. Both those need a key. Now you can just drop this table and put it again, right? You could do that. Yeah, matter of fact, let's do that. So I'm going to say PHP thunder migrate and say rollback or refresh. Does refresh actually work here? Let's see if that works. There's rollback and there's refresh. You know, I'm forgetting stuff here. So maybe let's see the help. What does it say? There's refresh and there's rollback. Okay, great. So let's try that. I'm going to say PHP thunder migrate. Let's try refresh. It drops table followed by running the migration again. So I don't know if we coded for this. Refresh inside basic posts, but I want to be very specific on which file I'm doing this. So I'm going to copy that. Boom. Okay. I don't know. It looks like it actually worked. So let's go to the structure for this. And there it is. It actually did work. Okay, goody. So now we have somewhere to put our mapping here. That is nice. Now a handy tip from one of the viewers is what I'm going to use here this time. Because normally, let me go to the to the views, admin, and this is the edit view. Now normally, yeah, we are putting a number here that's looping, but I was told you could, I actually know this, but for some reason I always forget to use it. So in the name instead, we can put an array there. So let's try that, shall we? So what I'm going to do is here in the category, let's do this instead. So we put a square, 2 square brackets right there. Let's see how that works for us. So I want to know category and its content. So let's go to our controller and let's go to the edit controller. All right. So right about here, before we even do anything, I just want to see what's inside the post data. So here I'm going to do d like this, and I can get what's inside here. So let's paste that over here and do that and put die like so. Yeah. Now make sure that in the edit.php here, you still have this console.log, this part here, because you need to see the result from the other side. All right, so I'm going to refresh this and let me take a few of these guys and let's hit save. All right, so it doesn't save, but let's go to the console and see what we get. So, and there we go. Looks like it actually does work, which is nice. So thanks for that tip. Several people have told me about this, but I always forget. So now I made sure that I actually use it, because the way it is with coding, if you don't use something, you actually forget that it exists. So thanks for that reminder. All right, so goody. That saves us a lot of work because we had to manually do this in the previous thingy here. Categories, yeah. So that's the name, good. Now I can get rid of the nums here, or could I? Wait a second. No, I actually need those for the labels. So we can leave those num++ because they're here. They give our labels, the IDs, a unique value. That way we can match them to the labels. Okay, so we leave everything as it is. It's just that part we are changing. Cool. Okay, so now we can have all the categories. We can select which categories are active. So with that in mind, all we have to do, not all we have to do, it's better to have, let's have a migration file, sorry. A model here that represents the mapping. So categories map, I think that's, let me just abbreviate that to categories map. That's the one we're going to have. Then we can put some functions in there that will help us run things more smoothly. So that's the beauty of OOP anyway. So what I'll do is inside here, PHP Thunder, let's make a model inside basic posts. What do we call that model? We call it categories map. There we go. It is done. So there is categories map model. So inside basic posts, great. Categories map, great. And now the table name is posts categories map. Like that. Okay, good. So what are the columns? Yeah, we can borrow that from here. There's post ID. Where is this? Category ID and disabled. So first of all, post ID. That one. And it disabled. Let me remove this and change that to disabled. Let me copy these babies and put them here. So in both cases, edit and update, add and update, we use all of them. Now, we don't need to validate anything here because this is just numbers that we are dealing with. it just saves integers, right? So what I'm going to do is remove these validation functions. We don't need them. All right, so the next thing we do is let's actually add some useful functionality here. So the first thing we want to do is we want to be able to disable all. Let me explain a little bit of how this is going to work. So you see there are many categories per post. So what will happen is that when we try to save, it actually brings us all the categories that were ticked, right? Like the user selected these. Now let's imagine this is on the add. We're just adding a new post and it says this and this category were selected. So there's two of them and one post. So how do we save that data? So how we save it in the table is that we'll write two records because there are two categories that were saved. And in both cases, we'll put the same post ID, okay? Post ID 1 and 1. And then we put category ID 1 and 3 because those are the categories that were selected, as you can see here, 1 and 3. So we'll have two records here, and disabled will be 0, which means they are not disabled. So then when we edit, because now we're starting with the edit, when we edit, there will be, let's imagine maybe this time there's category 2 and 3 instead of 1 and 3 because the user edited, okay? Actually, let's imagine 2 and 3, right? Now, if we go back and actually add a new record, then 2 will be added to the list, which is nice. But then the problem is 1 was removed, but it will remain there. So the best way to handle this is to first disable everything and then only tick back what was selected. So that's what we ought to do. So the first thing we need to do is go here, get a function that actually disables all the existing data for that particular post. So let's name it disable all, just like that. Yeah. So with disable all, we just need to provide which post ID we are dealing with. So here, let's say post ID, like that. Now you can put this as an int like that, and that will be good. So this doesn't return anything, so it returns a void, but you don't have to actually write that. Unless you want to be thorough, then you can. Okay, so disable all. And how do we do that? We have a post ID, right? So all we need to do is say this, and we say, now I want to update this, right? We can just write a query here straight away, and that can actually work as well. So let's just write a query, it's much cleaner. The alternative to writing a query is that we can read all of the records and then loop through those records and disable them one by one because of how we've structured our model thingy here. But instead of doing all that, we can just run a query. Simple and straightforward. So we say update. Now the table here, let's just say table. Update this table, all right? Set disabled is equal to 1, meaning we've disabled those, where the post ID is equal to post ID. Okay, we're not saying limit 1 because there could be multiple, but we have to provide the post ID, and let's do this, which is that post ID that was supplied over here. So it's as simple as that. We disable everything. Cool. So after we do that, now we have to tick those that were now the new ones, the new stuff. So now in the new, let me go back here and explain a little bit. So let's say that the ones that were previously ticked are 1 and 3, right? Now we have maybe 2 that's ticked, right? So we've disabled 1 and 3, which is cool, but now we have to tick category 2. So first of all, we need to check if it exists. Now, if there was 1 and 2 that you want to tick now, you check if 1 exists. If there's a record, you just enable it. But if there's no record, you add a new record. So that's what we ought to do here. So instead of disable all, we'll say save new, something like that. So with this, instead of having one of those, because what's coming back from here from category is actually an array, and it shows us exactly which ones should be ticked, right? So we should just be able to pass in this array to make things simple. Okay, so here I'm going to accept an array, and this will be category IDs. Let's do that. Now we don't have to call them category IDs because we want this this class to be portable, so we can move it to the pages plugin as well, right? So what I would do is do that, just call them IDs, right? Now with this, I'm going to loop through each ID one by one. So I'm going to say for each IDs as ID. So I don't need the key, as ID. So let me move a query app in there, like so. Now, first things first, we have to find that record if it actually exists. So we're going to do this and say exists, or we're just going to say check is equal to say this and say first. We just want one record, right? We are looking for where the category ID is equal to the given ID, all right? Now we're checking, and then we can say if check, but we can just wrap this inside an actual if statement and say if check, like so. And then if it doesn't, then we create a new record, something like so. Okay, cool. So instead of all these queries now we have an advantage, right? We can use proper functions that we created. Here I can say, if it doesn't exist, we insert. But then if it does exist, we update. So if it exists, updating is simple. We first need the actual row ID, the primary key ID, which is this one. So I'm just going to say check. Check will be inside because this is a record we've returned, so we have its ID. Then I'm going to put a comma where we put an array of the data. So the data we want is just disabled, should be set to 0. So we are enabling, if it exists, we enable it. If it doesn't, we create a new record. So I'm going to copy this and put it here. So let's make it look more like an array, so it's easier to edit and update over time. So I'm going to do this. What we need for a new record is post ID and, of course, category ID. So the IDs we have here are category IDs. So that is cool, which means we can just put ID here. But what about the post, right? Disabled should be 0, that's good. But what about the post? So we need to know that. So the array is an array of IDs, but then we need a post ID. So let's start, I would rather start with the post ID. So say int, and we need to supply that post ID, and then an array of category IDs. So maybe in the end, we still need to just say category IDs so that it's more descriptive. So let me just replace that here. Alrighty then, cool. This should work. And if I grab the post ID here, I can just put that there like so. Cool. So now we can disable all, we can save a new, but then at the same time, we need to be able to get the categories for a particular post ID, return them as an array. So this is what we will do. Let's create another function here to do exactly that. Now this will take a little bit of time, so maybe for now in this particular video let's just utilize these two functions. We'll come back and get that last function a bit later. So what I would do is, let's start with disable all. But first of all, we need to initialize this categories map. So I'm going to copy this. Let's go to the edit section here. Edit controller, rather. So what I want to do is, when we edit post somewhere here, and there's a part where we actually update the record, okay? And we do all of this stuff afterwards. So we can save categories later because they're in a different table. So we can do them after. So here what I'm going to do is say, I'm going to call this one categories map. CM is equal to new, and there's a namespace here, and categories map. All right, cool. So CM is easier to deal with. So let's do CM disable all, like that. But we need to provide the post ID. Now the post ID is the row ID, is it? This should be post ID, right? This is posts. We don't actually need to read this, but it is. This is the post ID. So let me grab that post ID and put it here. Boom. All right, so this satisfies our function, the disable all. And then finally, we need to actually save new. So here I'll duplicate this and run the save new. And of course we need that post ID, but also we need categories. So this array value is called category, singular, like that. So that's what we will do here. This is inside the post data package. So post data. So we're gonna say post data category, like that. That's an array. And that should actually work. Goody, goody, goody. So let's confirm that. We refresh the categories map table. There's nothing here, but we selected 1 and 3. So let's try that again, right? These are 1 and 3. Let's try and hit save again. Save. Record edited successfully. Pretty cool. Now let's confirm in the table. And things didn't work out, right? So the tragedy of okay, so what didn't work out? Now, in order to know here, we didn't get any errors, right? So let's try from here. Let's try and show the content of this, just to make sure that we have the right stuff. All right, so let's edit again, edit. Click on those and hit save. So it isn't saving. Let's see what we get. So that is correct. We have 1 and 3. That is moving according to plan. So everything seems fine. Now disable all shouldn't be the issue because there's nothing to disable anyway. But save new seems to have an issue. So save new, post ID. Let's make sure that things are running as intended. So for every category we loop, we first check these first. Categories map. Okay. We check for category ID, nothing. So we are sure it's not passing through here. All right. It is going here. So this insert, this should work. Anyway, just to be sure which position we are passing, we're just gonna call this number 2 and here number 1. I just want to see which of these parts it's going through, right? So that we know, we narrow down the problem. So I'm going to empty my console and hit save again. Okay, so it's going through number 2 and number 2, which is correct. It should do this. Okay, so number 2 and number 2, good. Number 1 can rest. So it's going through here. Nice. I'll leave that there for now. And so what is the problem? Insert. We have our post ID. We have our category ID. So what be the problem? Maybe it's a table name. Let me just make sure it's correct. All right. Category ID, post ID. Yeah, this looks about right. Category ID, post ID, disabled. Nah, everything seems fine. Yeah, everything seems fine. So what is going on? This is weird. Now, with coding, you can have a problem like this and it can last hours. You're just trying to figure it out and things don't seem to be working out. But for some reason, it has worked this time. That's strange. Maybe I had missed something on the table name. Maybe that was the problem. Posts categories map. Let me see. What table name did I have? Posts. I had an S there. Oh my goodness. These are simple things that can cause you a big headache. All right, so that actually worked. Surprise, surprise. So we have post ID and category. So this just means this post has 2 categories, number 1 and number 3. All right, so on the next video, we want to figure out, so let me save here, just make sure it actually goes back to the front. We want to load the categories here, and also when we click edit, I want to be able to see that the category is actually ticked over here. All right, we'll do that in the next video.